This is augforums.com Real Talk, an unfiltered, independent perspective on Acumatica Cloud ERP. My name is Tim Rodman, and I want to mention three things in this pre-recorded intro before we get started. First, thank you to our sponsors. Our first sponsor is Paya. Paya offers Acumatica users a suite of industry-leading payment orchestration tools. Far beyond native Acumatica payments, Paya enables EMV, NFC terminals for counter sale. They offer a frictionless customer portal through their click-to-pay solution, and they support most e-commerce platforms and point-of-sale solutions used with Acumatica, such as One Retail and AcuPOS. And best of all, omni-channel reconciliation is available for all of their solutions. Our second sponsor is DataSelf. DataSelf Analytics is a revolutionary reporting solution that enables organizations to make the most informed decisions faster and easier than ever. It uniquely simplifies business intelligence, empowers anyone to build and access dashboards, and delivers critical business insight when and where you need it. Our third sponsor is 24/7 Digitize. 24/7 Digitize is an Acumatica bookkeeping service provider that helps derive the best value from your Acumatica investment by maintaining your books utilizing Acumatica's best practices and guidelines. Please take a minute to support this podcast by clicking each one of the sponsor banners located at augforums.com/sponsors. Our sponsors track clicks, and every click helps to support this podcast. The second thing I'd like to mention is that I'm always looking for victims. Guests. If you use Acumatica in any capacity, no matter how small, I'd love to talk with you. Check out augforums.com/podcast and click the link near the top of the page to learn more about being a guest on the podcast. Third and finally, I'd love to see you listed on my Rolodex. Check out augforums.com/Rolodex to find out who else is using Acumatica and read the instructions at the top to see how you can add yourself to the list. All right, that's it for the pre-recorded intro. Let's get started. Today is Friday, September 16th, 2022, and this is episode number 97, Omar Lieves, Implementing Dakota WMS with Acumatica. Hey, Omar, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, so I was starting off with all of our guests, giving you an opportunity to tell us your brief origin story. Maybe you could tell us where you grew up, where you went to school, and how you got into the world of ERP systems.
Sure, yeah, thank you. So I'm originally from Mexico. So I grew up in northern Mexico. I went to school to university in a local technological campus. I have a degree in computer science, a bachelor's degree. And when I started working with a program or a software called Progress, which is a development language, a 4GL language. And my first ERP implementation that I was a part of, it was something called QAD, very unique for manufacturing. So most of my life I spent working on ERPs on the automotive manufacturing side of the fence. So I was working for big companies, and I had a chance to move to the US in 2006 when a company, Johnson Controls in Milwaukee, they offered me a position to become a developer here in the US.
So you were actually on the development side of things, at least for a period of time.
Correct.
Interesting. So you got involved with QAD, automotive specifically. Then where'd you go from there, and how'd you get from there into Acumatica these days?
Oh, sure. So I started, after QAD, Johnson Controls moved to SAP, and I was part of that team that moved from QAD to SAP. And back then, we were also running Oracle for some of financial applications. So through QID, I moved to Columbus, Ohio for another automotive company here in the region back in 2014, I believe. And from there, I started working on another ERP for called Plex, which was my first experience with cloud ERPs. And then this new company that I am a part of, they were looking for an ERP solution. And looking around, we evaluated different ERPs, but after looking at Acumatica, we decided that that was the way to go. And we have been implementing it since January with a potential go live of December this year. So we are all full steam ahead trying to get that off the ground.
So the new company that you're working for, only if you feel comfortable sharing details. Can you share like company name and even company size, like ballpark annual revenue, number of employees?
Oh, sure. So the company is RDP Food Service. They are in Central Ohio, here in Columbus. And we have around 100 employees, and the revenue is about $100 million a year with several different customers. Most of your favorite pizzerias here in Columbus, we can probably call our customers.
That's cool. Yeah, and I got to mention we're talking because you showed up a couple times now at the AUG Ohio quarterly gathering here in Columbus. You can check it out at augforums.com/AUG Ohio. And we've met there. You were telling us about the Dakota WMS, and that sounded kind of unique and interesting. So I wanted to talk about that. But before we get into those details, uh, you mentioned Plex. Was Plex something at RDP Food Service, or is that at another company?
No, it wasn't my previous company. I came from a commercial vehicle group in New Albany, and they were also implementing Plex to replace many of the old ERPs that they had. And what I liked about Plex, it was the first time that I dealt with ERPs on the cloud. So Plex is 100% cloud deployed, so you don't have anything on-prem. And I just loved how easy it was to pretty much, anywhere in the world that you could be. You don't have to worry about VPNs. You don't have to worry about having any tools except a web browser to connect to it. And the savings on all the on-prem equipment that you don't need to have anymore, you know, has me hooked on this kind of a deployment. So that's one of the things that we were looking for on the new ERP, and that's why I recommended Acumatica to RTP Food Service once I learned how it worked and the potential that it has.
Very cool. So maybe give us an overview of the implementation in terms of what you're trying to go live with in a couple months here.
Sure. So we have three main components to the whole implementation, right? So we have Acumatica, which is going to be the core system, the ERP system. So in there, we're going to be running distribution, we're going to be running sales orders, we're going to be running procurement, financials, outbound. So everything and anything data that we need is going to start in Acumatica. And then we're going to be using BFC Dakota as our WMS because it's a more mature warehouse management system than Acumatica has right now, especially because we require what we call voice picking. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but what it means is that our selectors, when they are picking our orders at night, they don't have to use their hands. They just receive verbal commands from this tool that is telling them where to go, what item to pick, how many to pick, and then again, they have their free hands to move as quickly as possible. So Acumatica doesn't have that, but they connect natively to BFC Dakota, and that again, was a real good match. And then finally, we are also revamping our e-commerce presence. And one of the main things, again, is that Acumatica allows to connect via APIs or what they call OData pools that makes it so easy to get data in and out. So those three main components is the scope of what we're trying to deploy by December this year.
And what is the e-commerce solution that you're implementing?
So the platform is called Oro, O-R-O, and it's a Very similar to Magento.
Gotcha. Yeah, there's a bunch of different ERP system or sorry, e-commerce platforms out there. The BFC, so you're calling it BFC Dakota is the official name.
Yes, that's our warehouse management system. Yes.
And that one sounded interesting to me. I know there's a few players in the Acumatica space. There's let's see, Fusion, which I think got purchased by Kenzium. There is, oh no, I'm gonna blank on these. There's of course the out of the box one that you mentioned. Let's start them one at a time. Did you look at the Fusion solution?
No, we did not. We only look at the Acumatica native solution and Dakota.
Okay. There's a couple others that I'm drawing a blank on at the moment. But Dakota was one that you were using already, or that's also new, just like Acumatica.
It's new to us. It's a company that has been around for a long, long time, and actually they started on the IBM, what is it called, I series. So it's an RPG running on IBM, but they developed this GUI screen that runs on a web browser, and that's the version that we're going with. So it's a company, a WMS, that has a pretty loyal following, and it has been around for, I don't know, 20 years or more.
I think you had told me previously that it focuses on food service. Is that right?
It does more than that, but that's one of their fortes, right? They have been doing food distribution for a long, long time, and that's one of the main reasons that it's such an easy, plug and play kind of deal.
Yeah, so you knew it was going to work in your industry because they have a lot of referenceable customers there.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of customers, big and small, already running that for their warehouse management system.
When you said voice commands, you were talking about the handheld device talking to the employee or the other way around?
It's both. So it's a Honeywell solution that you wear a headset, you are the person picking the orders, you wear a headset, and it's asking you for your batch ID, meaning what are you trying to pick? So you are talking to the device, and then the device replies to you and tells you, okay, go to this location in the warehouse, and you're going to pick item X, Y, and Z. So you tell back and say, I'm here. And then the device calls back and says, okay, now you are supposed to pick X quantity of that item. And that process continues until you are done picking up your order. But it's really fast because the other option is to pick using a handheld where you have to use your hands for it. But as you may imagine, it's not as quickly as the voice because now you have to use your hands to keep moving. With the voice, it's basically, you don't have to stop for anything. You just keep running until you are done with your picking.
That's pretty cool. You said a Honeywell device. I wonder if you could, I'm sure you have different options on which device you pick. Maybe you could email me the specific one you went with. I'd be curious.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, it's called AT700 series, and again, the Bulk Collect, that's the name of the software, is developed by Honeywell. But again, it interacts between BFC and the Bulk Collect, so it's pretty seamless. The person that is using it doesn't know, doesn't care where the instructions are coming from. All they care is that it's accurate and it's fast.
Can you spell that? Vocalex?
Yes, V as in Victor, O, and then the word collect, COLLECT.
Interesting. So that's the voice software that runs on top of the Honeywell hardware?
That runs on top, runs on its own web browser, and then it communicates with BFC. And I am not exactly sure how that communication happens, but again, it's pretty seamless.
Interesting. And the headset, is that a Bluetooth headset so you don't have any wires connecting, I assume?
Correct. Yes. So the device, right? What it connects to BFC goes over the wireless, and then the headset to the device is a Bluetooth connection.
And the Honeywell though is, I assume, like a handheld, like a barcode scanner type of device.
It can be. We don't use the barcode, but yeah, it can be. So there is some functionality that we're going to be adding in the future. But right now, you don't need to scan anything. As long as you're telling the device, I pick what you told me to pick, and I pick the right quantity, the device continues to let you, move. But yeah, I mean, some of these devices, you can add scanner to them. and then you can scan the item as you're picking it, which adds another layer of security, right, and accuracy.
Oh, interesting. So it's not you're not using the barcode functionality, but there is a handheld device. It's not just a headset talking directly to Wi-Fi.
Correct. No, it is a handheld device. Yeah, we actually call it the egg because it looks like one.
An egg. Interesting. I think I'd be really interested, only if this would be easy to do, but I'd be really interested if you could like play the voice interaction on speaker and record it on your phone. Like it does, do you know if it has a speaker capability or is it headphones only?
It has a speaker capability. We don't have the speaker to connect it to, but I can record it, and you can actually see in the tool, you can have the text, the transcript of what the device is telling you and what you're saying back to the device, so that you
Interesting.
can see the interaction. So yeah, I'll run that and send it to you. That's it's pretty neat.
I'd love to hear just like the audio recording, and maybe you can even like hold your phone up to the headset itself. And because what I'm curious, a couple things I'm trying to picture is first, to me, whenever I go to audio, I feel maybe extra pressure to get something done quickly. Like, maybe I start off on one side of the warehouse and it says, all right, I need you to go to bin A45. And that's 10 minutes till I get there. Is it like constantly checking back to me? Hey, are you still there? Did you get there yet? Or does it just sit and wait? How does that back and forth happen?
Yeah, so it tells you. Let's say that it says, go to bin 1A12, and then you drive your sled, your forklift, and then it waits until you say the word ready, and then now it knows that you're acknowledging that you are at the location that it told you, and then it's asking you to read what is called a check digit to verify that you are really at the location the device told you to be at. And then it verifies that what you are reading is correct, and it's asking you, it's constantly saying, did you say 1, 2, 3? And then you have to say yes or no. So it has a lot of checkpoints, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like it's too slow, right? The checkpoints happen pretty quickly, and the way that it communicates, as soon as it hears you, it says the next instruction. And if you didn't get it, if you didn't understand, you just have to say repeat, and it's going to keep saying it until you acknowledge and give the right answer.
Okay. And then what about when it reads off a part number? Does it read the part number and the part description?
It can. So what you do is you create something called a task package, and in that task package, you can actually give the instructions that you want to provide to your selectors, and it will read back anything that you want. It can read back the item number, it can read back the description, it can read back many different things. We as a company, we just have to strike the right amount of data and accuracy so that we'll slow down the people.
So what did you decide to go with? Just ID or just description?
So for now, we're just giving the location and then the item number. And optionally, if you're the picker, if you want to hear the description, you ask for the description to the device. So you just say description, and it's going to give you the description of the item. But again, it's not going to happen every time. You just have to ask for it.
Gotcha. And then it'll give you the quantity as well.
Correct. Yes. And then you have to say back the quantity that you picked, and keep moving.
Yeah, I've never heard of voice. I mean, I'm sure this, I'm just not into it as much. Never heard of voice picking. You feel like um, it's more, though, I have two things. One, you feel like it's more accurate, and then you also feel that it's faster as well than scanning with barcodes.
Yeah, definitely. Like I mentioned, I came from automotive manufacturing, and normally when you're picking an automotive, you're picking huge quantities of product, all of the same product at one given time. In food distribution, it's not like that. You are pretty much cherry picking a few items of this, a few cases of that. So by using voice, that's the way that the selectors move around the warehouse is so much faster than trying to use a handheld. And I know I've seen that firsthand. Uh, we have savings of probably 50% or more in time if you are trying to use a handheld compared to using the voice. So definitely is the way to go, at least in the food distribution. I don't think we could live without it.
And why do you think that is? Is it because you're selecting smaller things?
Definitely, yes, because you're only picking, one case here, one case there of this product here, and then you may have to go to a different location in the warehouse. And definitely, you have to plan your warehouse so that the device runs the most optimal route. But by not having to stop constantly to read a screen, that's what makes a difference.
Yeah, I could see how if you were in a warehouse where you're having to pick 100 of something or 200 of something, I might want the scanner because I'm going to lose track of that in my head, maybe, right? But if you're only picking 1 to 5 of a particular item, then I could just keep that in my head and tell the device what I picked.
Yes, exactly.
And then if I was doing something a lot larger, I oh, maybe that wouldn't really make a difference. Okay, that's interesting. So, sounds like you've been testing this already, and how's that been going in terms of the data communicating back to Acumatica? Has that been going well?
It's going great. Again, it's amazing. In our current system, the way that it works is that the data, because in our current infrastructure, right, in our current landscape, we also have separate systems for WMS and ERP. And the way that our current system communicates is by, every so often it runs a batch or a process that takes the data from ERP into WMS. In this new world, it's kind of like that, but it's also running APIs so that the communication is so much faster. The way that Acumatica and BFC in minutes or less than a minute, which again, makes or gives the feeling to the users that they are on the same system, which is something that we currently don't have. And that has been a huge gain for us. So the testing is going really well. The way that the two systems communicate, it hasn't been a problem. The challenge for us has been so far, data cleanup and pretty much getting rid of what we don't need so that we don't overload the new system with data that we no longer require.
Yeah, just your typical data conversion challenges. Curious, what is your current ERP and your current WMS that you're using?
Yeah, the company is called AFS. That's what we are running today.
And that's for both ERP
Yep,
and WMS. Okay,
correct.
interesting. And, what about the communication? You mentioned there's a syncing back and forth, although it sounds like it's much more real time than your current system. To maybe talk us through the infrastructure. Is it a handheld connected to Wi-Fi, which then connects to a BFC Dakota server somewhere, which then connects to Acumatica, or how does that happen?
So we are sending the data from Acumatica into BFC, right? So our sales orders are going from Acumatica into BFC. And then BFC is enabled to talk to this Collect server, and the interface between Collect and BFC is pretty much real time. So as soon as you're ready to pick a product, then Collect, excuse me, to pick an order, Collect knows exactly what's in that order and it starts directing you to go and pick. And then the communication between Acumatica and BFC is happening via APIs or pulling of what they call OData, I think. And that's how BFC keeps in sync with Acumatica. And then once the full process is completed in BFC, somebody goes and says, I'm done with that order, and they click a button that synchronizes the data back into Acumatica so that Acumatica knows to relieve inventory, to create invoices, all that kind of stuff. But again, it's happening immediately.
So Acumatica gets an order. It pushes that order over. So Acumatica's cloud. I should ask that. You're using the SaaS Acumatica.
Correct.
So Acumatica's in the cloud somewhere. It's then pushing the order over to BFC, which is also in the cloud somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have it local. It's a VPN connection, but yeah, we don't have it in on-prem.
And it's just a web browser that you use to access BFC.
Correct.
And then BFC from the cloud is talking to Vocalect, which is a local physical machine sitting in your warehouse somewhere.
That's right.
Okay. So that makes sense because voice can be a lot of data going back and forth. So the voice is just happening on your local network between the Vocalect server and the Honeywell handhelds.
That is correct. Yeah, that's exactly how it works.
And so Vocalec is taking care of the data back and forth between BFC and the cloud. And then BFC is the thing talking to Acumatica directly. That's just cloud to cloud.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Oh, cool. Well, that sounds interesting. Yeah, I'd love to hear it in action, or even see it in action. Whatever you could show us. I could add a little clip to this episode later whenever you get a chance to do that. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, sure. We have some testing scheduled for next week. I'll make sure to record that and share it with you.
What about pricing? So, like, if you remember, you're about $100 million company, so you're pretty good size, decent size for Acumatica. Do you remember ballpark like what your annual Acumatica price is and what your annual BFC Dakota price is?
I don't remember top of my head. I can get that back to you, but again, it's pretty affordable compared to all the other options that we looked at.
Interesting. That's cool. That's very cool. What about challenges? So talk to us about, actually, I'm sorry, before I go to challenges, back up. Talk to us about specific types of transactions that are syncing back and forth. So you talked about orders. Orders are coming over. So you can do shipping, I assume. Is there warehouse transfers? Is there bin transfers? Give us the different types of transactions from an Acumatica perspective, that you're able to do on that handheld.
Sure. Right. So on the Acumatica side, like I mentioned, it's our source of truth, right? So customers, stock items, vendors, all that maintenance is happening in Acumatica, and then that is sent over to BFC. The idea is that in BFC, you don't touch the master data. If you need to make a change, you go and do it in Acumatica, and Acumatica will be responsible for keeping in synchronization with BFC. So that's when it comes to master data. Now, on transactions, on the inbound side, so we have the POs going into a BFC, you're receiving in BFC, and then you send the data back into Acumatica to update your prices, to update your receipts, to update your bills, that kind of stuff. That's the integration when it comes to the inbound side. On the outbound side, we have the orders, the customer orders, actually full routes of customer orders going from Acumatica into BFC. And then in BFC, you do your planning for shipping and all that. You do your picking in BFC. And once you are done picking and shipping out to the customer, then BFC sends that data back to Acumatica so that you can get your invoices and updates the inventory. And yeah, that's pretty much the outbound. And then throughout the day, when you're doing your cycle counts and when you're doing adjustments and returns and all that kind of stuff, that starts in BFC, but the inventory and the balances and everything else is going back into Acumatica. So the idea is that you have all the GL, all the finance happening on the Acumatica side, and then the quantity, the inventories transactions is happening or controlling BFC, and just synchronized to Acumatica to keep them, talking to each other.
And so BFC is creating not just the GL side in Acumatica, but it is creating the purchase receipt. It is creating the sales order shipment. It is creating the warehouse transfer and the physical count all in the inventory module in Acumatica.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. So anything that touches inventory happens in BFC, and then it just sends that transaction over to Acumatica, where Acumatica takes care of maintaining the GL.
And then what about lot tracking? I assume in food service, are you doing lot tracking?
Yeah, we do. And it's the kind of thing, again, in Acumatica, you just mark an item and say, this is a lot tracked item. And then in BFC, it knows that it has to ask you for a lot when you are receiving it. And that information, again, stays in BFC, but it starts in Acumatica by saying we need to have lot tracking enabled for this item. And this is a customization that was done by a company in Connecticut, is what they call the bar in Acumatica. So this is not native to Acumatica. This is something that was developed by this bar company. And there is some customized modules for food service that Acumatica doesn't natively have, but other companies have developed.
Tell us more about that. So this sounds like an Acumatica customization. What did they need to customize?
So in food service, right, we have a few things like you were saying, lot tracking, manufacturing codes, packing codes that we need to keep track when you're receiving the item. Another thing that is called a catch weight, because some items, it's important for us to track the weight, I'm sorry, of the item, so that you can price it by the pound instead of by the case and that kind of thing. And Acumatica, to the best of my knowledge, doesn't have that natively. But there is this company called NextView in Connecticut that developed this module or this customization called Prime that does all of that. So things that are very unique to the food industry, food distribution industry, like an order guide for the customers, catch weight management, load tracking, some other stuff like early cutoff items or items that cut off that we need to create an order at a certain time of day. All of that is developed by this company, and then it runs natively on top of Acumatica.
So they created the stuff in Acumatica that allows you to store that information. And then what about BFC Dakota? Did you have to do customizations to get that to map into that custom stuff, or is it just like some way of configuring it to be able to map into those additional data points?
Yeah, it's just configuration because Acumatica and BFC, well, Acumatica, this software package called Prime and BFC, they had already customers before us that had done this integration. So for us, really, it's just a matter of configuring it to work the way that we want it. But we personally haven't had to customize much in either system.
Gotcha. Who's responsible then for that integration point between BFC and Acumatica? So I know there's APIs, but someone's got to be responsible when Acumatica upgrades to the next version. Someone's got to be responsible for maintaining that integration. Is that something that BFC owns, or is there a third party involved there?
So if BFC are the ones making the change and they understand or think that that's going to have an impact on the integration with Acumatica, they reach out to their contacts to let them know that they are working on this new functionality. And then the company, like in this case, NextView, will verify that no impact is going to happen to their code. And if it's the other way around, if in this case NextView, if they need to change something, they would get a hold of BFC because they already are, they are partners already. They work together. They reach out to them to let them know that they are working on something that may have an impact on their integration, and they just take care of that.
So it sounds like NextView is the one that you would call if you suspected a problem with the integration. Because like I just looked through the Acumatica marketplace, I don't find Dakota if I search for that. Dakota might not be an officially what's the word? An official extension for Acumatica, but maybe NextView is handling that. They would be your point person. Does that sound right?
Correct. Yeah. So in my particular case, right, if at any point, even now that we're testing for now, we are not live yet, but now that we're testing, anytime that have a problem, my first point of contact is NextView. And then, they do their due diligence and they tell me if it's really an issue on their side or if an issue on the PFC side. But even then, NextView, they can reach out to PFC and they can work it out together.
Gotcha. Yeah. So NextView is your throat to choke if you need help with that integration. What about, I want to go back to the lots then. So let's talk inbound. I'm doing receiving a purchase order. It tells me that I need to receive a certain item number, or maybe the reverse. Some people do like blind receiving. But what are you doing? Do you just tell BFC what PO you're receiving and what items, or does BFC come back and tell you all the items on that PO and which ones you might want to receive? You know which one option you're doing?
Yeah, so we're sending the whole PO to BFC, and by the whole PO, I mean all the items inside the PO. And then all you have to do in BFC when you're getting ready to receive is tell BFC, I am getting ready to receive PO 123. And then BFC shows you all the items in the PO. And then the receiver person, all they have to do is scan the UPC, the box manufacturing code or whatever. And then BFC connects the UPC to our internal item. And then the code is asking you for what quantity did you receive, and give me a pallet number. And if this is a lot control item, give me the lot. And if this is an expiration date control item, give me the expiration date. And that's all you have to do. So, 2 or 3 pieces of data, and you move on to receive the next item until you are done receiving the whole PO.
And is that done with voice or is that done with scanners? Because you're just on the receiving dock in one location.
Yeah, no, that is done with scanners. Yeah, because
Gotcha.
you have to manipulate the items. Yes.
So that makes sense because you're in one receiving area. You're not moving all over the warehouse. And especially with lots, that's what I was wondering. Do you have to read off the lot number every time? But that's you're just doing scanning, just working with BFC. You're not really working with Vocalect on that.
Correct. Yeah, you just have a scanner, you have a handheld device, and you're just receiving it. So at that point, yeah, book collect doesn't play any role.
Gotcha. Then what about on the picking side related to lots? So it must tell me not only just the item, how does it know which lot I picked off the shelf? Do I have to tell it that?
Yeah, he knows that because BFC knows what pallets are in that location. And since the lot is tied up to the pallet, you don't have to read out the lot. All you have to say is, I picked the item, and then BFC behind the scenes knows that when you pick that item, it came from this pallet, and that pallet is tied up to these lots. So it's pretty neat. You don't have to worry about knowing the lot or anything like that. All you have to know is that you're picking from the right pallet.
And that could be a food service thing that you don't deal with multiple lots on a pallet.
Not necessarily, no, because again, most of the time it's just whatever we receive, it came from the same lot from the manufacturer. So we don't have to be, so concerned about that.
Gotcha. So you're really picking pallets and then it knows the lot based off the pallet.
Correct. Yeah. You're picking items and it knows that item came from what pallet, and that pallet belongs to a lot.
So it sounds like everything is going great. The caveat there is that you're not live yet. Maybe talk to us about some challenges that you've had along the way and maybe some creative solutions you've had to overcome.
Yeah, like any other ERP implementation, and I have a background in project management. The biggest challenges has been the data cleanup that we have to do, and convincing some of my users that change is good, right? So when it comes to the actual implementation of the tool, the functionality is there. It's just a different way of accomplishing things. And that's really the sale that I'm trying to make at this point. But all in all, it has been a pretty positive experience. Again, I've done different ERPs, QAD, SAP, Oracle, and I hope that I don't have any SAP or QAD lovers listening to this podcast, but Acumatica is one of the easiest tools that I have found to manipulate data, load data, and change it if you need to. It's been refreshing.
And are you mainly using import scenarios for that, I assume?
Yeah, yeah. So we're exporting data from our current ERP into Excel. We load it into Acumatica via import scenarios. And if we have something wrong, you don't have to export it again. You just clean it up on Excel and load it into Acumatica, and you are done. It's really cool.
Interesting. Well, it sounds like it's been a very positive experience with the caveat that you're not live yet. But, still, that's great to hear. Something else I was just thinking of was what about shipping? Are you doing anything for third-party shipping tracking?
No, we're going to be using Acumatica and Dakota. And again, that's a project for a future deployment to do what we call electronic delivery proof, or proof of electronic delivery. But that's still a long way to go. But no, shipping right now is just control in BFC to load the truck.
Okay. And is there any other one thing I've seen when you get into a WMS, sometimes the WMS will store a further level of detail than gets pushed back to the ERP. Do you have a situation where BFC is tracking something that maybe there is not a home for in Acumatica, so that you have to go into BFC to see it? Or is everything that you do in BFC in Acumatica as well?
No, there are some things, and this is by design, right? So, like, if you are in Acumatica and you want to see how many pallets of item X you have, you will not have that in Acumatica. You have to go into BFC if you want to see a detailed report of how your inventory, where is stored, on how many pallets, where are the pallets, that kind of thing. But that is really the biggest difference, or the biggest piece of data that you will not have in Acumatica. Acumatica will show you you have 50 cases of that thing on hand, but if you want to know what exactly they are, you have to go into BFC for that.
About putting things into packages. So on the shipment record in Acumatica, there's a packages tab, and you can tell Acumatica what items you've put into what packages. Is all that getting pushed back in Acumatica as well?
No, we're not using that functionality. I didn't know it existed.
You're just picking items on a shipment record
Correct.
and quantities.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay. And you said the plan right now is to go live November 1st?
December, the first week of December. Yep.
December.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'll totally understand. I just finally got the date. I'll be sending it out today. I just firmed up November 16th will be our next AUG Ohio gathering. So you might be too busy for
I'll be there.
during that time. All right. Well, we'll hear how it's going.
Oh no, definitely. It was really good that I found you guys, because it's really good to have that networking and knowing people around me that know more than I do, and to have that support is pretty reassuring.
That's cool. Thanks for coming on and sharing your story. I think it's really interesting to hear your very positive experience so far, especially coming from a larger system background, SAP, etc. A lot of times when someone comes to that space into any mid-market product, they're expecting all these things that, of course, aren't there in a mid-market product. So it's refreshing to hear that you've been having a great experience, even coming from such a large system background. That's interesting.
Yeah, because Acumatica, you can tell that it was designed to be a web application, right? A lot of the older systems, they had the old code and they are trying to put a web browser on top of the old code, and it doesn't always work as intended. In Acumatica, it's just a web browser. You know exactly what to do. If you're familiar with how to use a web page, you're going to pick up Acumatica. There's no doubt in my mind. So that, again, you just have to understand the scope of that solution and understand your functionality that you need to address, and just adapt to that.
I think they call that lipstick on a pig when you try to put a web interface on a old clunky software. You can tell when you're interacting with it. It's just not as smooth, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you can tell, right? The old screens, the old black and white screens, or the old green screens running on a web browser, they make no sense, right?
I totally hear you there. Well, hey, again, Omar, thanks for coming on. Any other last things you could think of that you want to share with the audience?
No, I mean, anybody that is listening to this podcast, if they have any questions or they want to follow up on something, I'll be more than happy to. As you can tell, right? I'm really happy to talk about this, and always finding or trying to find people so that my network grows and I can be better in the Acumatica world, especially. I don't think we're going to be using all of Acumatica immediately, but definitely, there are so much room for growth. So thank you for having me. It's really been a pleasure talking to you, and I hope this is not the last time.
All right. Well, that's it for now. We'll catch you on the next episode of AUGforums.com Real Talk. Thanks for listening and take care.